Welcome to the Land to Lots podcast, powered by Launch Development Finance Advisors. And now your host, Carter Froelich.
Welcome everyone to the Land to Lots podcast. My name is Carter Froelich, and I'm very excited to introduce to the Land to Lots podcast, Carl Pischke, a principal with RC Elko Real Estate Consulting, and Pam Giss, a principal with Launch Development Finance Advisors. Today's topic is the top selling master plan communities, of which RC Elko prepares a top selling master plan community survey twice a year. And additionally, we're going to be drilling down into these top selling master plan communities to understand how these top selling communities are financing their infrastructure. If we're going to drill down on the on some of the figures, on average, what are the top master plan developers financing in terms of net proceeds per door, as you had indicated earlier, and how high are they increasing their property taxes as a result? And let's quantify that in terms of property taxes as a percentage of home price.
Well, if you look at just on a net construction dollars per lot basis, Arizona, Florida, and Nevada are fairly similar. They're in a very similar range. Florida pushes it a little bit more. But, and when we look at this, I think it's important to say that we're really looking for an average home in each one of these communities. We're ignoring the outliers, the more expensive homes and the least expensive homes, and trying to find something right in the middle. But on average in these states, I'd say about $12,500 to $30,000 range per lot. Then you lean over to California and Texas, where you see significantly higher net construction proceeds. California is really not that surprising, but I think we were a little surprised by Texas. So in a range to lowest in the mid-year study for Texas and California was 17,000 net construction proceeds per lot, up to 77,000, and that the 77,000 was actually in Texas and not California. So that was kind of interesting. You know, this is going to increase a homeowner's bill. Arizona, California, or in Arizona, Colorado, and Nevada are generally staying under $2,000 per year additional costs for the district. Florida is a little bit higher at $2,500, but Texas and California are increasing the property tax bills by about $4,300 to $5,300 per year. And so that was interesting. I think when you're looking at estimated property taxes as a percentage of a sample home price, Arizona, generally stays under 1%. Nevada is about 1.3%. California has sort of the California rule of let's stay under 2%, and they've done that like barely, but they hover right under 2%. And then you see Florida's, also under 2%, but Texas really blows it out of the water. That 2% doesn't hold in Texas. We're looking at about 2.15 to 3.4% taxes as a percentage of home price in Texas, which is pretty strong. Now the home prices are a lot cheaper. That helps them out a lot. They're a lot cheaper than California, obviously, but
yeah, and they also don't have income taxes in Texas, so they're trying to make up for it with property taxes. Yeah. Carl, our firms have done a lot of work together, and as it relates to MPCs, and when you're taking a look at master plan communities and you're advising your clients, when it comes to special district financing, does the added property tax burden from a special district come into play into both impacting price and pace as it relates to absorption?
Well, it's certainly something to consider, but I think the short answer is no, that it's not having a significant impact on overall price or pace. And I think you can look no further than the figure right at the top of the financing mechanisms report that 87% of all of the sales that are occurring within those top 50 communities are being done within a special taxing district. I think the longer answer is that people generally feel that they're getting more value for their dollar in a master plan community. And so that added property tax burden is just viewed as being part of that overall investment. So we do consumer research typically on an annual basis or every couple years. And we'll do a poll where we ask people where they want to live. And without exception, for the past decade, we found that more people want to live in a master plan community type of environment. And they typically indicate that they'll pay more to be in a place that has open space and recreational amenities, maybe a commercial center, really an all-in-one community where their needs are met. And so, there are many home builders that have created very nice subdivisions and nice places to live, but the master planned community is different. It's developed from a vision. It has more of these parks, open spaces, facilities, and infrastructure that really facilitate the lifestyle offering that people want. And so all of those things are what buyers perceive as additional value that they're willing to pay a premium for.
Yep. And that's something we often tell our clients is, listen, if we're going to be using a district on your project, we need to be able to point to the fact that we've provided better recreational amenities, more open space, more trails, more parks, larger parks, et cetera, so that the home buying public knows what they're getting for their money. And I think that's what you alluded to. The other thing is that the MPCs, from what I'm hearing you talk about, it's clearly lifestyle that people are looking at buying. They want the lifestyle that these planned communities offer. Is that an oversimplification or?
No, I don't think that's an oversimplification. I think that's absolutely correct. Look no further than the villages, which we were talking about earlier, right? They're a community that has clearly set the bar, and they've accomplished that through delivering 4 town squares, over 100 restaurants on the property, 2,400 clubs, 100 recreation centers of various sizes, hundreds of tennis courts, pickleball courts, dog parks. And I think the last statistic I saw was more holes of golf than any other community in the world, but something to the tune of 10,000 tee times available per day. And so there is clearly an advantage to offering that lifestyle component and having the infrastructure to back it up.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm going to drill down a little bit on what you said. And it used to be it seemed like the best ideas that MPC developers had is, let's put a golf course in. And in fact, if we really want to turbocharge this thing, let's put 3 of them in. And I'm not poo-pooing anybody that does that. It's just that was a trend during the 80s that we saw a lot of. And as you were discussing the villages and some of the amenities that they have, what have you been seeing in terms of this ever-changing landscape as it relates to amenities and creating lifestyle in your tenure and or the firm's tenure in providing consulting services to the MPC development community?
Yeah, well, going back to some of that consumer research that I mentioned before, it is interesting comparing the results of what buyers are looking for or what they were looking for in, say the early 2000s compared to, what we see as being consistently billed as a top amenity desire today. You're right in that golf was something that was very much at the top of the list for a long time, and really that disappeared following the Great Recession, where we really were quite over golfed in many communities. But what we've found in the past few years is that open spaces, parks, trails, walking and hiking trails in particular, have become some of the most in demand and desirable amenities to have within a community. And that focus on wellness and health and activity has really been a successful strategy for a lot of communities, not just communities like the villages that are catering more to an active adult market, but to the market more broadly. And so those kind of outdoor spaces and including spaces for your furry friends, dog parks and dog runs have become incredibly popular in a lot of master plan communities. So that increased emphasis on outdoor spaces has been important, and I don't think it's diminished in any way, certainly since 2020 and the pandemic, when having access to outdoor spaces and not being confined to indoor environments became quite valuable.
Yeah. And one other question that I just thought about, yeah, given what happened during the pandemic, given the fact that people were cooped up in their homes, are you seeing the work from home continuing going forward? Are you advising any of your MPC developers that they may want to take a look at some sort of uh, uh, place for people to congregate and work if they're where they can get out of their house, their home office, or are you seeing that people will be heading back to the office on a permanent basis or some hybrid thereof? I'd love to get your thoughts on kind of what you're seeing and how you're advising your clients in relation to that matter.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. And of course, our crystal ball, like many others, are cloudy at the
Yeah.
moment. But I think what we did see during COVID was a shift in folks looking for more space in their homes, recognizing that they were going to be spending more time there, looking for office space to work from home, looking for school space in some cases as children were learning remotely and via Zoom. And that desire for more space and increased space, that seemed to have in some ways had some staying power. And based on I think the latest numbers, we're still not seeing a massive shift towards going back to the office full time. I think if I had to uh, take a wager here, I would bet that uh, some form of work from home continues in perpetuity. Maybe that's not permanent work from home, certainly, but a more flexible or hybrid model seems to be here to stay. Here at RCLCO, as a firm, we're operating on that flexible hybrid model. We generally have team members going into the office 2, maybe 3 days a week, and then working from home the remainder of the time. And so continuing to cater toward that need for additional space and space that is more functional for the purpose of working from home, I think is going to be incredibly important for master plan community developers to continue to think about.
Great. Thanks, Carl. And Pam, as you were looking and doing the math on all of the financings that the MPCs are using, what are some of the things that you came across that were really interesting that you would like to share with the listeners?
I can think of sort of two things that come to mind offhand. And the first is we appear in front of quite a few jurisdictions to talk to them about forming these districts and to talk to them about other needs that our clients have. And one of the things I hear all the time from the jurisdictions is that we're too conservative. Council members don't like new taxes. Our staff doesn't like new taxes. Our client, our residents don't like new taxes. But in looking at this, if you look at the states that are in the top 50 consistently and dominating, it's Texas, Florida, Arizona, Nevada. These are traditionally red states, right? And I hear this in Idaho and in Utah and Arizona, which are traditionally more red states. And so I think that, you have people all over the country that are buying into these ultra successful master plan communities with higher taxes in traditionally red areas. So, I think that's a really weak argument. And I think that it's, I think that this top 50 is useful for so many things. I use it all the time to send to jurisdictions in advance of going before them because I want them to understand what it takes to build one of these communities. The second thing is that at one time, Arizona had 8 projects in the top 50, and now we've got 3. And I'd love Carl's thoughts on longevity on this, but If these projects have lots to sell, once they figure out how to make a successful project, if they have lots to sell, they seem to stay there. And we have one client who's consistently in the top 50, but they ran out of lots, and he's been kicking himself that he didn't keep the machine going because he missed on, out on the last year of this market. So to me, it says you've got to build during these slow times in order to have something to sell during the strong markets, because districts takes months to create, 6 to 12 months, depending on the jurisdiction. And then we've got to sell the bonds and you got to build your infrastructure. And if you wait for a hot market to move forward, you're going to miss out. So Carl, I'm just curious, as far as the staying power for these projects, I see the same projects over and over again, and then they'll pop off, and then it seems like they get more lots to sell and they pop back on. Do you have any insight in that?
I mean, I think you said it well, right? Once you have that scale and you've created that lifestyle offering for residents, being able to feed that machine with additional lot inventory is really important. I think we had a lot of clients that put the pause on further lot development in early 2020 as there was all that uncertainty that came around as we started entering into lockdowns. And of course, none of us could have predicted what happened after that, but every single one of those developers or community managers that decided that they needed to slow things down or pause really ended up kicking themselves later on in the year when we entered one of the hottest housing markets that we've seen in a while.
Now, thanks for that. And as I look at the list, what I really see is that people are willing to pay for lifestyle. And I'm also seeing that there's really occurring, at least with these master plans, a privatization of the infrastructure and the financing of that infrastructure. And that given the right lifestyle, that the homeowners are willing to pay for that. And Pam, to your point, where they're not necessarily willing to pay for that is where they're really reliant on the cities and they're not getting a lot of value. If I can, is that an oversimplification, guys? I'm just asking that question out loud to see if that might be resonating somewhat, because at least with the MUDs in Texas that are financing a lot of the infrastructure of the top 50, they're owning and operating water, sewer, in some case roads and parks. The CDDs, the same thing in Florida, not necessarily with the CFDs in California or Arizona. Any thoughts on that, guys?
You're thinking about districts that are managed by the developers versus districts that are managed by jurisdictions?
Well, no, I'm just saying that as it relates to taxes, and you're saying that we're a conservative state and or we may be a red state, is that the homeowners and the market, if I can use that term, are willing to pay for infrastructure provided they see value being lifestyle, value being open space trails, recreational facilities,
Right.
and those types of things. And what we've seen and what we continue to see as we work across the smile is that the cities have gotten out of the development in this business, meaning they are no longer constructing collectors and arterials and traffic interchanges. I mean, they are to some degree, but they're really reliant upon the private sector to do a lot of the infrastructure development that they used to do.
Right.
Is that an oversimplification as it relates to some of these large communities?
Well, I think too, one of the things that is worth commenting on, there's a lot of thought that goes in, and we've had discussions with developers. We have discussions with developers about this every day, but we had a podcast with RCL Co. 6 months or so ago where we had Lakewood Ranch on there, and that discussion was had at that time too. There's a lot of thought that goes into making sure that we don't put so much of a burden on these lots that they are unmarketable. And it is an art form. And it does take a lot of cooperation with the developer to understand what goals they have, who they're marketing to, what what they're trying to bring to market to get that part of it right. Because obviously you can burden a lot to the point where it does then become unmarketable. So
Yep.
I think it's an art form, but I think that what it says is these projects are getting that right, that they're getting that balance right, that they haven't put so much on that the person buying the lot feels like they're not getting value out of it. So um, it pays to take time on the front end to make sure that that balance is solid.
Yep. Well said. Well said, Pam. Well, Carl, Pam, we're getting close to the end of our time together. Let me ask you both the same question. Is there anything that I should have asked you that I didn't ask that relates to this topic that you would like to share with the listeners? Carl, let me start with you.
Well, you haven't asked me to make any hard and fast predictions in the future, which I am appreciative of. But I think, as I mentioned before, if I've learned anything over the last 2 years, my crystal ball is still fairly cloudy. But um, it probably is a good topic to consider, given a lot of what we're seeing, especially in the negative headlines right now about the economy and the uncertainty surrounding where things might be headed. What does that mean for master plan communities moving forward? And it is true that sales in the top MPCs, as we saw in the mid-year, were down by almost 18% compared to the prior year. Supply chain issues and limited inventory have continued to be problems. Interest rate hikes are pricing out some home buyers. Consumer sentiment is dipping. So all of this is playing a role in what will likely be or what will ultimately become the MPC performance for 2022. And it's very well possible that we'll be seeing a near-term cooling in not only the master plan community market, but the for sale housing market overall. But I think despite this near-term slowing, it's important to note that the fundamentals underlying new home demand remain strong in the longer term. Specifically, millennial households continuing to enter prime family formation years, a life stage that traditionally precedes single family home ownership. And so long-term demand for single family housing is likely to remain strong. And these demand projections brought on by demographic tailwinds are also coupled with a housing environment that continues to be undersupplied. So if there is a recession, as many economists are predicting, it is important to remember that on average in past recessions, new home sales typically decline by less than 10%. And that's not including the 60+% that things fell in the first year of the 2008 recession, which obviously occurred under very different circumstances. And of course, there also is an additional silver lining for master plan communities in that historically, MPCs have tended to increase their market share in times of economic turmoil. So analysis that we've run showed that during the run up to the Great Recession, as an example, MPC market share fell, and then it significantly increased once overall sales in the market dropped. What we see that as is a flight to quality or a flight to safety, where MPCs are really just perceived to be a better and safer investment, in addition to being a better place to live during challenging economic periods. So overall, I would say that despite some potential near-term headwinds and challenges that we might face, the future for MPC development remains quite bright.
Yeah, no, thanks for that, Carl. And that's very consistent with what we're seeing. Underlying fundamentals are still good, given the supply demand equation. And as it relates to good times in the market, we're seeing that the MPC values increase faster than non-MPC values. And during a downturn, they decline at a slower rate than surrounding communities. So that's very consistent with what we've seen in the market as well. Pam, how about you? What
Yeah,
question should I have asked that I didn't?
this is actually for Carl. If you're out there and you're creating a master plan community now, Aside from getting a great team like RCLco and Launch on board to help you with your product selection and your financing, when you look across your top 50, is there something that these guys did right straight out of the box that put them on the right track? Is there something some product selection that they led with? How do they get that first boost?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. I think the MPCs that really have had the most sustained success are the ones that uh, began with a very comprehensive visioning process that put resident lifestyle first, that really understood what they were creating was a community, a place where people would want to live and work and play, and that is what has helped attract buyers to some of the best communities in the country. Um, you know, Speaking to the villages, which we've already talked quite a bit about, they started out in the early '90s and began fairly modestly, and it really wasn't until they began to see what was being done at places like what Del Webb was doing in Arizona, for instance, where they saw this model of creating an entire world for retirees, where they could do that with recreational amenities and shopping and services, expanding that kind of model to include clubs and social activities and nightlife and bars and restaurants, things that really emphasized me time, where the message of the villages really became, come here and live a great life. And so having that focus on lifestyle orientation in mind, I think, is what triggered the explosive growth that they've seen and have been able to sustain. And I think while that is certainly a unique example and one of the best examples, that has been happening, at least at a smaller scale, in every single one of the top 50 master plan communities in the country.
Wow, thanks for that, Carl. That was really, really interesting. Pam, thank you as well. And with that, guys, I'd like to conclude this session of the Land to Lots podcast. For our listeners, we will be providing a link to the RCLco Real Estate Consulting and Launch top 22 sales of the top selling master plan communities. Infrastructure financing mechanisms, which is the title of the publication that is put out by RCLco and Launch. It'll provide additional detail related to how the top selling master plans are financing their infrastructure. It'll also give you the number of units that are being sold by each one of these communities. Also, we'll have links so that you can contact both Carl and Pam. And thank you very much for taking time out of your day to listen to Land to Lots. Thank you.
You have been listening to the Land to Lots podcast with Carter Froelich. Tune in next week for the next episode.